Hi everyone, it's Hayley here from the Gale Library in Newton. I am here with Fablehaven. We are on chapter 9 this week, 9 of 19. So 10 more weeks to go and we'll be done with Fablehaven. But I'm really enjoying it, I hope you are too. So if you remember, chapter 8 was called Retaliation, and poor Seth had unknowingly cursed a fairy. He caught her in a jar and he left her in his drawer overnight, and she turned into an imp, or an imp? I'm sure it was an imp. And she wasn't very happy about it. So all of the other fairies, worried for their own safety, turned Seth into a weird walrus type creature. But Grandpa saved him and went to see the witch and turned him back to himself. So if you remember that chapter, I'll read the last part of it for you. We are here every Monday at 4 o'clock. And don't forget, if you miss any of our chapters, you can go onto our YouTube channel. So you can just go onto YouTube and search Gale Library Newton, and you'll see our picture right there, so you'll know it's us. And you can catch up on story times, craft videos, Fablehaven, all the good stuff. All right, so let me just give you a recap of where we left off in chapter 8. Grandpa placed a hand on his shoulder. I know you meant no harm. Around here, what you don't know can hurt you, and others. If you have learned to be more careful and compassionate in the future, and to show greater respect for the inhabitants of this preserve, then at least some good came of all of this. I learned something too, Kendra said. Humans and walruses should never mix. So that was the end of chapter 8. All right, so here we go. Chapter 9, Branda Mull's Fablehaven. It's called Hugo. The triangular wooden board rested on Kendra's lap. She studied the pegs, planning her next jump. Beside her, Lena gently tilted back and forth on her rocker, watching the moon rise. From the porch, only a few fairies could be seen gliding around the garden. Fireflies twinkled among them in the silver moonlight. Not many fairies out tonight, Kendra said. It may be some time before the fairies return in force to our gardens, Lena said. Can't you just explain everything to them? Lena chuckled. They would listen to your grandfather before they ever listened to me. Weren't you sort of one of them? That is the problem. Watch. Lena closed her eyes and began to sing softly. Her high, trilling voice gave life to a wistful melody. Several fairies darted over from the garden, hovering around her in a loose semicircle, interrupting the warbling tune with a fervent chirping. Lena quit singing and said something in an unintelligible language. The fairies chirped back. Lena made a final remark and the fairies flew away. What were they saying? Kendra asked. They told me I should be ashamed to sing a Naiadic tune, Lena replied. They detest reminders that I was once a nymph, especially if those reminders imply that I am at peace with my decision. They acted pretty upset. Much of their time is spent mocking mortals. Any time one of us crosses over to mortality, it makes the others wonder what they might be missing, especially if we appear content. They ridicule me mercilessly. You don't let it get to you? Not really. They do know how to needle me. They tease me about growing old, my hair, my wrinkles. They ask how I will enjoy being buried in a box. Lena frowned, gazing thoughtfully into the night. I felt my age today when you called for help. What do you mean? Kendra jumped a peg on the triangular wooden board. I tried to rush to your aid, but ended up sprawled on the kitchen floor. Your grandfather reached your side before I, and he is no athlete. It wasn't your fault. In my youth, I would have been there in a flash. I used to be handy in emergency. Now I come hobbling to the rescue. You still get round great. Kendra was running out of moves. She had already stranded a peg. Lena shook her head. I would not last a minute on the trapeze or the tightrope. Once I played them with agility. The curse of mortality. You spend the first portion of your life learning, growing stronger, more capable, and then, through no fault of your own, your body begins to fail. You regress. Strong limbs become feeble, keen senses grow dull, hard constitutions deteriorate. Beauty withers, organs quit. You remember yourself in your prime and wonder where that person went. As your wisdom and experience are peaking, your traitorous body becomes a prison. Kendra had no moves left on her board. 3 pegs remained. I never thought of it that way. Lena took the board from Kendra and began setting up the pegs. In their youth, mortals behave like nymphs. Adulthood seems impossibly distant, let alone the enfeeblement of old age. but ponderously, inevitably, it overtakes you. I find it frustrating, humbling, infuriating experience. When we talked before, you said you would not change your decision, Kendra reminded her. True. Given the opportunity, I would choose pattern every time. And now that I have experienced mortality, I do not imagine I could ever be content with my former life. But the pleasures of mortality, the thrills of living, come with a price. Pain, illness, the decline of age, the loss of loved ones, those things I could do without. The pegs were set up. Lena began jumping. I'm impressed by how most mortals confront the debilitation of the body. Patton, your grandparents, many others, they just accept it. I have always feared aging. The inevitability of it haunts me. Ever since I abandoned the pond, the prospect of death has been a menacing shadow in the back of my mind. She jumped the final peg, leaving only one. Kendra had seen her do it before, but had not yet succeeded in copying her moves. Lena sighed softly. Because of my nature, I may have to endure old age for decades longer than any other human being. The humiliating finale to the mortal condition. At least you're peg jumping, genius, said Kendra. Lena smiled. The solace of my winter years. You can still paint and cook and do all sorts of things. I do not mean to complain. These are not problems to share with young minds. It's okay. You aren't scaring me. You're right. I can't really picture being grown up. Part of me wonders if high school will ever really happen. Sometimes maybe I think I'll die young. The door to the house opened, and Grandpa's head poked out. Kendra, I need to have some words with you and Seth. Okay, Grandpa. Come to the study. Lena stood, motioning for Kendra to hurry along. Kendra entered the house and followed Grandpa into the study. Seth was already seated in one of the oversized chairs, drumming his fingers on the armrest. Kendra claimed the other one, while Grandpa settled behind his desk. The day after tomorrow is June 21st, Grandpa said. Do either of you know the significance of that date? Kendra and Seth shared a glance. Your birthday? She attempted. The summer solstice, Grandpa said. The longest day of the year. The night before is a holiday of I can't get my words out. Now I've lost my place. A rocious abandon for the whimsical creatures of Fablehaven. 4 nights a year, the boundaries that define where different entities can venture dissolve. These nights of revelry are essential to maintaining the segregation that normally prevails here. On Midsummer's Eve, the only limits to where any creatures can roam and work mischief are the walls of this house. Unless invited, they cannot enter. Midsummer's Eve is tomorrow night, Seth said. I did not want you to leave time for you to fret over it. As long as you obey my instructions, the night will pass without incident. It will be loud, but you will be safe. What other days do they run wild? Kendra asked. The winter solstice and 2 of the equinoxes. Midsummer's Eve tends to be the rowdiest of them all. Can we watch out of the windows? Seth said eagerly. No, Grandpa said, nor will you enjoy what you saw. On festival nights, nightmares take shape and prowl the yard. Ancient entities of supreme evil patrol the darkness in search of prey. You will be in bed at sundown. You will wear earplugs, and you will not arise until sunrise. Dispels the horrors of the night. Should we sleep in your room? Kendra asked. The attic playroom is the safest place in the house. Extra protections have been placed on it for the sanctuary of children. Even if, by some misfortune, unsavory creatures entered the house, your room would remain secure. Has anything ever gotten into the house? Kendra asked. Nothing unwanted has breached this homestead walls, Grandpa said. Still, we can never be too careful. Tomorrow, you will help prepare some defenses to afford us an extra layer of protection. Because of the recent uproar with the fairies, I fear this could be a particularly chaotic Midsummer's Eve. Has anyone ever died here? Seth asked. On this property, I mean. We should leave that topic for another time, Grandpa said, standing up. That one guy changed into dandelion seeds, Kendra said. Anybody else? Seth insisted. Grandpa regarded them soberly for a moment. As you are learning, these preserves are hazardous places. Accidents have occurred in the past. Those accidents generally happen to people who venture where they do not belong, or tamper with matters beyond their understanding. If you adhere to my rules, you should have nothing to worry about. The sun had not yet risen far above the horizon as Seth and Dale walked along the rutted lane that ran away from the barn. Seth had never particularly noticed the weedy cart track. The lane began on the far side of the barn and led into the woods. After meandering for some time beneath the trees, the track continued across an expansive meadow. Overhead, only a few wispy clouds interrupted the bright blue sky. Dale walked briskly, forcing Seth to hustle in order to keep up. Seth was already getting sweaty. The warm day promised to be hot by noon. Seth kept watching for interesting creatures. He spotted birds, squirrels, and rabbits in the meadow, but saw nothing supernatural. "Where are all the magical animals?" Seth asked. "This is the calm before the storm," Dale said. "I expect most of them are resting up for tonight." "What sort of monsters will be out tonight?" "Stand warned that you might try and pry me for information. Best not to be so curious about those kinds of things." "Not telling me is what makes me curious. It's for your own good," Dale said. "Part of the idea is that telling you might make you scared. The other part is that telling you might make you even more curious. If you tell me, I promise I'll stop being curious." Dale shook his head. "What makes you think you can keep that promise?" "I can't possibly get more curious than I already am. Not knowing anything is the hardest." "Well, fact of the matter is, I can't give a very satisfying answer to your question. Have I seen strange things, frightening things in my time here? You bet. Not just on festival nights. Have I stolen a peek out of the window on a festival night? A time or two, sure, but I learned to quit looking. People aren't meant to have things like that in their minds. Makes it hard to sleep. I don't look anymore. Neither does Lena, neither does your grandfather, neither does your grandmother, and we're all adults." "What did you see?" "How about we change the subject?" "You're killing me. I have to know." Dale stopped and faced him. "Seth, you only think you want to know. It seems harmless to know, walking under a clear blue sky on a fine morning with a friend. But what about tonight, alone in your room, in the dark, when the night outside is full of unnatural sounds? You might regret putting a face to what is wailing outside the window." Seth swallowed. He looked up at Dale, eyes wide. "What kind of face?" "Let's leave it at this. To this day, when I'm out after dark, I am sorry I looked. When you're a few years older, a day will come when your grandfather will give you the opportunity to look out of the window on a festival night. If you start feeling inquisitive, postpone your curiosity until that moment. If it were me, if I could go back, I'd skip looking altogether." "It's easy for you to say after you've looked." "Not easy to say. I paid a very heavy price to say it, many sleepless nights." "What can be so bad? I can imagine some scary things." "I thought the same thing. I failed to appreciate that imagining and seeing are two very different things." "If you already looked, why not look again?" "I don't want to see anything else. I'd rather just guess at the rest." Dale started walking again. "I still want to know," Seth said. "Smart people learn from their mistakes, but the real sharp ones learn from the mistakes of others. Don't pout. You're about to see something impressive, and it won't even give you nightmares." "What?" "See where that road goes over that rise?" "Yeah." "The surprise is on the far side." "You sure?" "Positive." "Better not be another fairy," Seth said. "What's the matter with fairies? I've already seen about 1 billion of them, and also, they turned me into a walrus." "It's not a fairy." "It's not like a waterfall or something, is it?" Seth asked suspiciously. "No, you'll like it." "Good, because you're getting my hopes up. Is it dangerous?" "It could be, but we should be safe. Let's hurry." Seth dashed up the rise. He glanced back at Dale, who continued walking. Not a great sign. If the surprise were dangerous, Dale would not want him running ahead. At the top of the rise, Seth halted, staring down at the gentle slope on the far side. Not 100 yards away, a huge creature was wading through a hayfield, wielding a gigantic pair of scythes. The hulking figure slashed down wide swaths of alfalfa at a relentless pace, both sides hissing and chiming without pause. Dale joined Seth atop the rise. "What is it?" Seth asked. "Our golem, Hugo. Come and see." Dale left the cart track and started across the field towards the tolling Goliath. "What's a golem?" Seth asked, trailing after him. "Watch." Dale raised his voice. "Hugo, halt!" The scythe stopped cutting in mid-stroke. "Hugo, come!" The Herculean mower turned and jogged towards them with long, looping strides. Seth could feel the ground vibrate as Hugo approached. Still clutching the scythe, the massive golem gave halt in front of Dale, looming over him. "He's made of dirt?" Seth asked. "Soil, clay, and stone," Dale said. "Granted the semi-balance of life by a powerful enchanter. Hugo was donated to the preserve a couple of 100 years ago. How tall is he? Over 9 feet when he stands up straight. Mostly he slouches closer to 8. Seth gawked at the behemoth. I'm struggling with my words today. It's a Monday feeling. In form, he looked more ape-like than human. Aside from his impressive height, Hugo was broad with thick limbs, disproportionately larger hands and feet. Tufts of grass and the occasional dandelion sprouted from his earthen body. He had an oblong head with a square jaw. Crude features resembled nose, mouth, and ears. Eyes were a pair of vacant hollows beneath a jutting brow. Can he talk? No, he tries to sing. Hugo, sing us a song. The wide mouth began to open and close, and out rumbled a series of gravelly roars, some long, some short, none of them bearing much resemblance to music. Hugo cocked his head back and forth, as if swaying to the melody. Seth tried to stifle his laughter. Hugo, stop singing. The golem fell silent. He isn't very good, Seth said. About as musical as a landslide. Don't embarrass him. He doesn't think like we do. Doesn't get happy or sad or angry or bored. He's like a robot. Hugo just obeys commands. Can I tell him to do stuff? If I order him to obey you, Dale said. Otherwise, he just listens to me, Lena, and your grandparents. What else can he do? He understands a lot. He performs all sorts of manual labor. It would take quite a team to match all of the work he does around here. Hugo never sleeps. If you leave him with a list of chores, he'll labor through the night. I want to tell him to do something. Hugo, put down the scythes, said Dale. The golem set the scythes on the ground. Hugo, this is Seth. Hugo will obey Seth's next command. Now? Seth asked. Say his name first so he knows you're addressing him. Hugo, do a cartwheel. Hugo held out his palms and shrugged. He doesn't know what you mean, Dale said. Can you do a cartwheel? Yeah. Hugo, Seth is going to show you a cartwheel. Seth put up his hands, lunged sideways, and did a cartwheel with a sloppy form. Hugo, Dale said, obey Seth's next command. Hugo, do a cartwheel. The golem raised his arms, lurched to one side, and completed an awkward cartwheel. The ground trembled. Pretty good for a first try, Seth said. He duplicated yours. Hugo, when you do a cartwheel, keep your body straighter and aligned to a single plane, like a wheel turning. Hugo, do a cartwheel. This time Hugo executed a nearly perfect cartwheel. His hands left prints in the field. He learns fast, Seth exclaimed. Anything physical, leastways. Dale put his hands on his hips. I'm sick of walking. What do you say we let Hugo take us to our next stop? Really? If you'd rather. We can always walk. No way. Kendra used a hacksaw to separate another pumpkin from the vine. Further down the long trough of soil, Lena was cutting a large red one. Nearly half the greenhouse was devoted to pumpkins, big and small, white, yellow, orange, red, and green. They had arrived at the greenhouse by a faint trail through the woods. Aside from the pumpkins and plants, the glass structure contained a generator to power the lights and the climate control. We really have to cut 300, Kendra asked. Just be glad you don't have to load them, Lena said. Who does? It's a surprise. Are jack-o'-lanterns really such a big deal? Do they work? Quite well, especially if we convince fairies to fill them. With magic? To dwell in them for the night, explained Lena. Fairy lanterns have long been among the surest protections from creatures with dubious intentions. I thought the house was already safe. Kendra began sawing the stem of a large orange pumpkin. Redundancies in security are wise on festival nights, particularly on Midsummer's Eve, after all the recent commotion. How will we ever carve all of them before midnight? Leave that to Dale. He'll carve them all himself. But with time to spare. Not always the most artful renderings, but the man can mass produce. You carve for fun, he carves for need. I never liked pulling out the guts, Kendra said. Really? Lena said. I love the slimy texture, getting greasy all up to my elbows, like playing in the mud. We'll have delicious pies afterwards. Is this white one too small? Maybe save it for autumn. Do you think the fairies will come? Hard to say, Lena admitted. Some, for sure. Normally, we have no trouble filling as many lanterns as we need to carve, but tonight might be an exception. What if they don't show up? Kendra asked. We'll be fine. Artificial lighting works, just not as well with fairies. With the fairy lanterns, the commotion stays further from the house. In addition, Stan will be putting out tribal masks, herbs, and other safeguards. Is the night really so awful? Oh, you'll hear plenty of disturbing sounds. Maybe we should have skipped the milk this morning. Lena shook her head, not lifting her eyes from the work. Some of the most insidious tricks employed tonight will involve artifice and illusion. Without the milk, you could be even more susceptible. It will only broaden their ability to mask their true appearance. Kendra severed another pumpkin. Either way, I won't be looking. I wish we could transplant some of your common sense into your brother. After all that's happened, I'm sure he'll behave tonight. The door to the greenhouse opened, and Dale poked his head in. Kendra, come here. I want you to meet somebody. Kendra walked to the door with Lena behind her. In the doorway, Kendra paused and let out a small shriek. A bulky creature with a simian build was marching towards a greenhouse, pulling a rickshaw-type contraption with the size of a wagon. What is it? He's Hugo, Seth crowed from the inside of the handcart. He's a robot made of dirt. He jumped out of the cart and ran over to Kendra. I ran ahead so you could see him approach, Dale said. Hugo can run really fast when you tell him to, Seth gushed. Dale let me give him orders and obey everything I said. See, he's waiting for instructions. Hugo stood motionless beside the greenhouse, still holding the rickshaw. Had she not just seen Hugo moving, Kendra would have assumed he was a crude statue. Seth shouldered past Kendra into the greenhouse. What is he? Kendra asked Lena. A golem, she replied. Animated matter granted rudimentary intelligence. He does most of the heavy labor around here. He's loading the pumpkins and rolling them into the house in his cart. Seth exited the greenhouse, toting a fairly large pumpkin. Can I show her a command? He asked. Sure, Dale said. Hugo, obey the next command from Seth. Holding the pumpkin at his waist with both hands, leaning back a bit to stay balanced, Seth approached the golem. Hugo, take this pumpkin and throw it as far as you can into the woods. The inert golem sprang to life, grasping the pumpkin in one massive hand. He twisted and then fiercely uncoiled, hurling the pumpkin into the sky like a discus. Dale whistled softly as the pumpkin shrank into the distance, finally dropping out of sight, an orange speck vanishing far behind the treetops. Did you see that? Seth cried. He's better than a water balloon launcher. Regular catapult, Dale muttered. Very impressive, Lena agreed dryly. Forgive me if I hope you put our few pumpkins to more practical use. You boys come help us cut the rest of the harvest so we can get them loaded. Can't Hugo do a few more tricks? Seth begged. He knows cartwheels. There will be time for nonsense later, Lena assured. We need to finish our preparations for this evening. I'm actually really looking forward to the next chapter. Chapter 10 is called Midsummer's Eve. And I have got a sneaking suspicion that Seth is going to be too curious and might peek out of the windows. So listen, you guys, I will not be live next week, but I will be posting a pre-recorded YouTube video of chapter 10 for us to listen to next week. So I hope you guys have a wonderful 4th of July weekend. We are closed next Monday. Other than that, you can come and see us Mondays and Wednesdays from 12 till 6, Tuesdays and Saturdays from 9 till 1. Take care. Have a great week. I will see you next time for Fablehaven Chapter 10. Bye.